bris oder benegel reife echt al der ze weil der ze echt binyone mische wie der mond frie und binyone eise katsasi didim mi vidim weil der ze bishar ho inyonim ke musker li bishabos vetan le khochom ve yach kamei wo dos kelbel bichlol di alles scheiles wo sie do und befragt noch hechit am Wiese so do hechit der Linie von Bakoschas Brocha und wegen der Monne nach Benzin wie Kajese bose hat mir nechet a Hiro Bruro in Teras Emes was sie seche Teras Chaim Hiro Bachayim als a Brief oder a Pidien was mich schickt und mich schickt das in derech von Dine de Malchuse, Dine durch Adeyer, was ihm nicht jasset geworden, und gefindt sich bei Hashgochas am Malchus, wo das ist der Dine de Malchuse. Es al Pischul Chonorach, a sichere Sache, hat es kommt, und zu dem, zu wem hat es geschrieben. Und sechet a sichere Sache, a kol Yisrael becheskas Kaschres, also schickt das zu a Jiden, und wer dem Mieden soll das bringen, und dann sehen echt bet na broche bose am befragt noch bei nisi der reine was an nos hi hu hakel und hat tiber gegeben die savo von sein vater als rei sroi is lei jazva sein marisa lei und sa sichere sach amaba hallo ne zap kan eme du mishamish und mich haben es jeder reden, die mit von dem Dorf, die mit Duber, ho Anoschen, wo Anoschen, wo Hatav, und es mich haben es ist hat eine Sicherheit, war Pischul Chonorach, als geschickt hat Pidien, der Pidien sicher angekommen, als versichert der Schulchonorach, und gebeten nach Jiden, soll bringen den Pidien, auf den Ziehen von der Sidereno, ist Kol Yisrael bechesras Kascheres, versichert hat die Chazok und der Ihnen, der Dien Schulchonorach, hat der Ried hat sicher gebracht, auf den Ziehen von der Sidereno, hat echt in Adam Chelik, was nicht a Linie von Scheibe Seizer, nur bei Koschas Brocha, und sicher bet mit sich a Brocha von Mekeir a Brocha, she bechol der wa des, wo das sich ist Pashtusse de Meshe, she bechol Dore, über der Reino, nisi der Reino, was at kann, eme du Mishamish, wo befragt hat, das geht alle durch dem Zinnische Leben, wo dort ist Munach, der Gufe die Lein Kadisha, und das echt verbunden mit Nafsha die Lein Kadisha und Ruche die Lein Kadisha und ich mosse die Lein Kedish Kadoshim, wo das ist echt die Hero, als echt bei Negele, bei Koshas Brocha, ist es nicht stamm, als wird angenommen, es wird geentfert von der Side Reino, das wird geentfert in der Neven, aber das spielt in dem Kabel am Main, der Kirche, die Heroes, Pashtus, oder Hetler, und Rufus Maslechose, ist das aber in der Neven, aber das immer Spier, Bipnimius, in den Minionen und an hoge Pnimische Lei,
Yashikech for participating. This Fabrengen is dedicated Linishmat Harav Shvei, Maradas of Crown Heights. Harav Yosef Braun will join us momentarily, and just asking everyone to be patient.
Yeah.
Braun.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so let's start. First, I'm just going to move the screen a bit closer. Okay. So just apropos for what was just said about Rabbi Shvei, this is Le'ili Nishmit Rabbi Shvei, which a lot of these halachas we discussed together, and learning this halacha, besides the fact that the Shiur in general, but because they're halachas that we discussed together and we put out together a lot of these halachas in the guides of the Bezdin, this is an additional aliyah tanashama for him. There's a lot of information to cover. I'll try to do this as much as we can during the limited amount of time that we have. Be'ezer Hashem. So we're standing today on Early Gimel Sivan, which is one of the days of Achana to Kabbalas HaTorah. And the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch goes through every single day from Rosh Chodesh Sivan how that was Achana to Kabbalas HaTorah. And the Rebbe tells us how each one of those days we need to utilize the same way in preparing for our Kabbalas HaTorah, which will happen on Shavuos. We're told about the Friedrich Rebbe that the days before Shavuos, he was miyaker the time very much. The time was extremely precious. So this is where time is very precious in terms of our preparation for Kabbalas HaTorah. We're going to, like I said, we'll try to do the best we can. The minhag we don't take haircuts throughout Sfira. Minhag Chabad particularly is not even to take haircuts on Lag BaOmer or in Shlosh Simei Agbala, but we wait dafka till Erev Shavuos, which means we could take it on Thursday morning, and even Wednesday night is not a problem either. That's already considered Erev Shavuos. We could take a haircut. It's extremely important to take a haircut because the halacha is that a Chol HaMoed, the reason why we're not allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed is not because Chol HaMoed is Isra Malacha, because a haircut is not included in the Inin of Malacha. It's just Le'ikanas, L'chag, L'regel, Krumanuvos, in order that a person shouldn't come into Yom Tov totally not looking properly. Therefore, Chazal made a rule that you can't take a haircut on Chol HaMoed. Like this, a person will know that he has no choice. He won't be able to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed, and therefore he'll take a haircut before Yom Tov. So that's an extremely important thing, especially now that we haven't taken a haircut for such a long time, and some people, even before Pesach, had difficulty due to the technical difficulties of the virus and barbers being closed. So it's extremely important to make sure that we remember we take a haircut before Yom Tov as a covet for Yom Tov. Music. The minhag is not to hear music until Shavuos. Erev Shavuos is okay. Some people are already lenient to Shlosh Simei Agbala, but ideally music is actually a bit more serious than other things associated with Avelis, and therefore one should not hear music ideally until Erev Shavuos. When it comes to preparations for Yom Tov, the halacha is a mitzvah saseh min HaTorah to be happy on Yom Tov. V'samachta b'chagecha. And part of that happiness includes, for men, that includes drinking wine. So it's a mitzvah saseh, at least a mitzvah saseh min HaTorah, to drink wine on Yom Tov every single day of Yom Tov. We could incorporate the revius of Kiddush that could be incorporated in that, but some people are machman and take an extra revius, not to be used just with the revius of Kiddush. But for women and children, there's other ways how to do the Simchas Yom Tov. And the way to do the Simchas Yom Tov for women and children, that's incumbent upon the man to make sure that happens. As much as we're very careful on Sukkot, we make sure that we get a beautiful esrog, and on Pesach, we make sure we have very mehudadig matzos. On Yom Tov, there's a mitzvah to make our wives happy, and that's through buying them begadim, v'tachshitim, clothing, or jewelry, or whatever it is. So that's an important mitzvah. It's a mitzvah same in HaTorah. We have to make sure we fulfill that. For children, that's supplying them things which children become happy. In the time of the Gemara, that was roasted wheat and nuts. And nowadays, it's probably toys, I would imagine, is something that would make children happy. Talking about Simchas Yom Tov before Yom Tov, something that's important to remember is that, how do you go down? How to do this. Sorry, I'm not good at the technology here, so I'm having someone help me out over here. Is that here? Okay. Sorry, I have to move this way. I can't see what's going on. Talking about doing proper Simchas Yom Tov, making our wives and children happy, there's a whole other set of people which are also part of the Samachta B'Chagecha. Samachta B'Chagecha, Ato V'inchu V'techa, Avtecha V'Amasecha V'Alevi V'Ager V'Hayosim V'Almana. And Chazal tell us, if you make mine's happy, I'll make yours happy. There's the four people of the Eibishter, which is the Levi, the convert, the widow, and the orphan. And your people are you, your son, your daughter, your family, etc. So if we make sure to make the Eibishters happy, to make all the victims of society, all the nebuchs, all the people that don't have what they don't have, can't afford to really make properly Yom Tov. If we make them happy, part of what the Rambam tells us, Simchas Yom Tov, is to make sure that we don't close our doors. Maybe for quarantine purposes we have to do that, but in terms of Hilchas Yom Tov, we don't keep our doors closed, and just make sure that we enjoy ourselves and ignore everybody else around us. So that's called not Simchas Yom Tov, that's called Simchas Kreise, that's called making our stomach happy. And it's important to make sure that other people can afford to really celebrate Yom Tov. Shavuos might not have the same expenses as Pesach, but there's expenses on Yom Tov, and maybe they should also have a chance to fit out their children. Now, particularly in the current situation where the pandemic has affected us in a significant way, a lot of people literally have been out of their jobs and hardly have any money. So this is a call to action for anybody that's listening to this or will be listening later, to make sure not to forget your neighbors and other people and supply them with the needs of Yom Tov. That is part of the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. On Erev Shavuos, there's a number of halachas that are unique to Erev Shavuos. One halacha which is Erev Shavuos specifically, more than any other Erev Yom Tov. In fact, every Erev Yom Tov, this halacha applies as a gzeira because of Erev Shavuos. And one of the halachas is that one is not allowed to go for a blood test on Erev Shavuos. There's a question whether bloodletting today is the same as blood test today, whether they're the same as bloodletting, but certainly in halacha says Erev Shavuos is more severe, and Erev Shavuos we shouldn't do blood tests. I guess people that are doing plasma donations could schedule it for a different day. Of course, we're talking about the Indian of Pikuach Nefesh, so that's doing for a lot of these things, but still, Erev Shavuos is not the right day for this. Something specifically this year, very important to remember, and every reminder you get about this is not extra, is helpful, and that is this year. We haven't done this in a very long time. We're making an Erev Tashilin on Erev Shavuos. Since Shavuos is on Friday, Shabbos, so Thursday we have to remember to make an Erev Tashilin, take a challah. It doesn't have to be a matzah, a challah, a baked food, and a cooked food. The cooked food is much more important than the baked food. A cooked food could be an egg that's commonly done, a piece of fish, piece of meat, chicken, whatever it is, and pick them up and do the nuscha of Erev Tashilin that it says in the Siddur. And for those of us that are worried about social distancing, you actually don't have to call on another person and have him pick it up like it says in the Siddur. That's an extra thing. That's not a requirement to make the Erev Tashilin work. The Rav in the city who does an Erev Tashilin on behalf of everyone needs to make sure he does that, because his job is to make sure to have him on everybody else. And for some reason, everybody started having Abbas Yisrael, and everybody does it for everyone, but that's not really critical to the Erev Tashilin. The main thing is to do it for your own family. Mentioning the fact that the Gadol Ha'ir, the Rav in the town, does an Erev Tashilin to everyone, there's a misconception about that, and some people think, oh, it's just a good idea to do an Erev Tashilin, and if I didn't do it, I could always rely on the Rav. In fact, the Shulchan Aruch, it says that if a person forgets to make an Erev Tashilin, it depends why he forgot, whether he's considered an Oines or Pesheya. If he didn't do an Erev Tashilin and he said, listen, I could always rely on the Rav, that's considered a Pesheya. That's considered being negligent. We can't just rely on the Rav's Erev Tashilin only in certain cases where it's really a genuine Oines. And that is why you see signs all over, and WhatsApps and emails all over, reminder Erev Tashilin, almost as much as charity campaigns coming in every single second on Erev Yom Tov, because it's really critical to remember. And if a person doesn't make an Erev Tashilin, he's stuck with candle lighting from Yom Tov to Shabbos, with cooking food from Yom Tov to Shabbos, and it's not a very pleasant Shabbos when you can't have your cholent. Now, if a person does forget, there's one has to discuss with the Harav whether their case is one of those cases that you can rely on the communal Erev Tavshilin, number one. And if not, are there any solutions? And there are some solutions, but they're really difficult and challenging. So it's definitely important not to forget. Something which is this kriyas of this Yom Tov, which doesn't apply whenever we make an Erev Tavshilin, that sometimes if you forgot to make an Erev Tavshilin and you remember on Yom Tov, you could do a Tanai. There's a certain Tanai that you can make when there's 2 days Yom Tov that could allow you to make the Erev Tavshilin on Yom Tov itself. But that only applies when Yom Tov is Thursday, Friday, and you're cooking on Friday for Shabbos. This year, when Yom Tov is Friday, Shabbos, we can't, on the first day Yom Tov, you remember that Tanai won't work, and therefore we're really stuck if we didn't make an Erev Tavshilin. So the bottom line is, don't forget to make Erev Tavshilin, make yourself a mental reminder, an alarm, whatever it is, to do that Erev Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin does not work for all preparations for Yom Tov to Shabbos. There are certain limitations to the rule of Erev Tavshilin. Number one, Erev Tavshilin only applies to tzarchei suda, the things that you're using for the actual meal. And number one, so if you're going to do other preparations for Yom Tov Shabbos that are not meal related, not like washing dishes, which is meal related, not like cooking food, etc., stam things that you're doing from Yom Tov to Shabbos not related to food, Erev Tavshilin doesn't work for that. And to give a far-fetched example, but that's the example brought in Halacha, if in the shul they want to prepare the Sefer Torah on Friday for Shabbos, and there's laning on Friday, which is one Kriyas HaTorah, the laning on Shabbos is a different Kriyas HaTorah, and they want to just roll the Sefer Torah in advance, they can't do it on Friday for Shabbos, and the Erev Tavshilin won't help them because this is not something associated with a meal. Candle lighting, for example, you could light Yom Tov to Shabbos because candles enhance the meal, but preparing the Sefer Torah has nothing to do with the meal, and Erev Tavshilin won't help. The second important limitation about Erev Tavshilin is that when you are preparing from Yom Tov to Shabbos, all the food has to be ready well enough in advance on Yom Tov so it should be usable on Yom Tov. And I'll explain why. Really, this Erev Tavshilin, how does Erev Tavshilin work? If you now want to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos, how does it help if I went and I set up before Yom Tov and I took a bread and an egg and I picked it up? How does that make everything work all of a sudden? So this is a bit of a complex issue, and I'm not going to go into the whole arichas, but suffice it to say that I'll put it simply. The Gemara says that really min haTorah, even though you're only allowed to cook min haTorah, oichel nefesh, food that you need for Yom Tov, and when you're cooking for Shabbos, it's not food that you need for Yom Tov. But nonetheless, on some level, it would be okay, the cooking for Yom Tov to Shabbos, because you could use the food on Yom Tov. And that's called the principle of hoyel. Hoyel means since, that's a translation of the word hoyel. But what that means is that since there is a chance that guests might show up in your house on Yom Tov, when you're cooking your cholent on Yom Tov for Shabbos, you can always say, I might have guests and I might be able to serve them the cholent, although I already ate my Yom Tov meal. But a guest might show up, I want to serve him something. So therefore, the whole cooking that I'm doing for Yom Tov to Shabbos isn't really an Isser min haTorah. It's only an Isser d'Rabbanan, because with Rabbanan we can't rely on this idea they might come guests. Now, once it's only an Isser d'Rabbanan, Chazal were lenient with their rule, and they said if you make some type of reminder for yourself, you already started your Shabbos cooking Erev Yom Tov by doing the Erev Tavshilin, you have your challah for Shabbos, and you have your cooked food for Shabbos. Once you started, you'll remember the idea that you can't cook from Yom Tov to another day. So therefore, whether you got the logic behind it or not, I'm not looking at anybody else's camera, so I can't see whether people are following or not. The bottom line principle is that the Erev Tavshilin only works because the food that you're cooking on Yom Tov will be usable on Yom Tov. But if you're setting up your cholent right before Shabbos, and it won't be ready on Shabbos, without going into the Shabbos issues about setting up a cholent too close to Shabbos. But over here, you have a different issue. There's ways to loopholes in terms of the Shabbos aspect. But in terms of the Erev Tavshilin is meaningless because the whole Erev Tavshilin only works because the food is ready on Yom Tov. So everything that you want to do from Yom Tov to Shabbos, don't do it the last minute. It has to be usable on Yom Tov proper. Moving on to, this was all about Erev Shavuos. Let's move on to Shavuos itself. And once saw a good simon to remember the various minhagim of Shavuos, and typical Chabad style, half of these minhagim we don't keep, or we do them differently. But these are the minhagim that I mentioned in Paiskim. All the minhagim of Shavuos are alluded to in the word acharis. Hein ge'alti eschem acharis kivreishis. And acharis, we nowadays, after Matan Torah, we're doing a memory to Matan Torah. Kivreishis like was the Matan Torah. Acharis is the Rosh Tevis. And we can probably find the Lubavitch similar type of Rosh Tevis. Right now, I'm already thinking that the Tafka stands for Talucha. But in any event, the Rosh Tevis that's brought in Svarim is Acharis is Aleph Agdomus, which is not our meaning to say Agdomus on Shavuos, but many shuls do it, and the Rebbe himself did it also. I've seen that with my own eyes. The Ches is for Cholov, eating milchiks. The Reish is for Rus. The custom is in many communities to read Megillas Rus. Again, not our meaning, but we do Megillas Rus as part of the Tikkun al Shavuos. The Yud for Yerek, we prepare vegetables, greenery, that means flowers and greenery in shuls and in our homes. And again, Chabad minig is that we don't prepare something like that in shuls, but people do have flowers at home. And the Tuf is for Tikkun al Shavuos. So we'll go through these various different minhagim and the halachic aspects of these minhagim. And let's start, because we don't do Agdamas, that's the Aleph of Achris, I'll move on to the Ches, to Cholov, to Milchiks and Shavuos. So first of all, it's a general halacha which is not very well known. The halacha is you're not allowed to make milchig or fleshig bread or any dough mixed with milchig or fleshig. And the reason is because if you're going to make a milchig bread, people might by mistake eat that in a fleshig meal, and vice versa. If you make a fleshig bread, people might eat it in a milchig meal. Now, when it comes to sweets, pastries, people are very lenient about that because a cheese Danish is not really something they eat together with meat. You might eat it in a fleshig meal, but you don't eat the cheese Danish with your chicken sandwich. It's just not the type of thing that people do. So people make cheese Danishes and cheese blintzes and these kind of things, and milchig cakes. Although practically speaking, when stores do it, it does cause a lot of problems. We know this in the kashrus world. The store makes a pastry, and some people don't know whether this is cheese, milchig, or not milchig. You have to put a sticker on it. So the problem does happen. But bread, dough, where you mix dough, which is eaten in a meal together with food, like together with meat, like bread, for example, or challah, you really shouldn't be making milchig bread or fleshig bread. But if you're making a very small amount that's eaten on that day, then it's permissible to do that. And by the way, it's not only a question that you're not allowed to do it. If you made milchig bread, you're not allowed to even eat it, because you were over on the rule not to make milchig bread. But if it's a small amount, you're allowed to do it. And therefore the Ramah brings that the meaning is on Shavuos to make these milchig kind of kuglach or whatever it is. We make these milchig fillings, and it's not a problem making a small amount, only that's what's going to be eaten on Shavuos, and therefore this is not an issue. Some people don't have a milchig oven, and Shavuos they want to prepare a milchig meal, and they start running into all kind of shilas. How do I make my fleshig oven? How can I accommodate my milchig requirements? So there's solutions for that too. We could kasher the oven, although it's not so simple to just turn on the oven to the highest setting and kashering it, but from fleshiks to milchiks, that is a legitimate approach. We can, again, I'm not going to go into the whole lumdus, but most poskim say that it's okay. The fact that we don't really cook food, we cook food usually in trays. We don't put the food directly on the fire, and it's usually in a pan. And our ovens are different than the ovens in those times. It's not directly, like the oven, the fire is separate from the actual cooking, and many other reasons. And therefore, a person can say when it comes from treif, that's a bit more complicated to kasher oven from treif. But if you're kashering an oven from milchiks to fleshis to vilchiks, which al pi halacha requires a lesser form of kashering, just turning on the oven for the highest setting, for an hour should be fine. Some people want to be machmer and they want to do a self-clean. Gesundheit, they can do that, but you don't really have to. I should say that's not a smart idea to kasher back and forth from milchiks to fleshiks, because that could create problems. And in fact, in Shulchan Aruch, in Pesachim it's brought, there's a meaning that we don't kasher from milchiks to fleshiks, because of the fact that people might forget. You forget if something was milchiks or fleshiks. The meaning is we don't kasher from milchiks to fleshiks. But that applies to regular kashering. A kashering in an oven, where you're turning on the oven to the highest setting, which is not a normal kind of kashering, that is okay to kasher for milchas and fleishigs. But again, it's not recommended to do that on a regular basis because then you'll keep on forgetting. So which one is it now, the milchik time or the fleishig run? So it's something that should not be done. Alternatively, there's another option. You could keep the oven fleishig and take the food, the milking of food, and double wrap it and put it into the fleishig oven. It might not be smart from a chef's point of view because your cheesecake might not bake properly. Cheesecake or your pizza usually doesn't go well if it's covered, but I'm talking now from the halacha point of view. I'm not in the baking industry. From the halacha point of view, double wrapping it shouldn't be a problem, but it's not something which is kedai to do. Poskim advise against double wrapping. Things could rip, things could spill. The double wrapping only works with dry and clean, where the rack is dry and clean. But if a person got stuck on Yom Tov and they forgot to kasher their fleishig oven, or they be using it until the last minute right before Yom Tov, now they want to warm up their milchig food, they could rely on the double wrapping, making sure the area is clean and dry, and double wrap the milchig food and warm it up like that. There's also an option of kashering the oven on Yom Tov. How do we do that? Now, we can't turn on the oven to the highest setting because you can't turn on the oven on Yom Tov. But I'm assuming your oven was on from before Yom Tov, like most people have an oven which is on from before Yom Tov. So now you can heat up water in the oven, but you can't really heat up water in the oven on Yom Tov for kashering because kashering is not called a form of echel nefesh. You can't go, you're doing it in order to kasher, but you're not doing it directly for food. So you can't heat up water just like that on Yom Tov, but you can take water that was heated up for drinking anyhow, which you're allowed to heat up water for drinking on Yom Tov. Take that water and then put that water into the oven and let it heat up in the oven, which was already on from before Yom Tov. And the steam of the water will kasher the oven. Or alternatively, take water that was heated before Yom Tov from your urn, assuming it's still hot, it's plugged in urn, and take that water which is already hot and reheat it in the oven. That's a form of kashering that could be done to your oven on Yom Tov if you forgot. Another option is take your hot plate. A lot of people ask this question. They want to use their regular hot plate. They use a whole year for Shabbos and Yom Tov for their cholent, for their soup, and they want to put it in some milchig food. Make sure the hot plate is clean. Cover the entire hot plate with silver foil, and on that you can put your milchig food. Again, the milchig food should be wrapped. But you can't cut a piece of silver foil in order to do this. You're not allowed to cut silver foil on Yom Tov, not because you're cutting to size. Even if you're not cutting to size, it's called mesaken mana. You're actually fashioning a vessel. I know it sounds strange, but what you're doing is you have a roll of silver foil which doesn't really have a use. And now when you cut off a piece, you have now a usable piece of silver foil. And that's how lucky they now want to cut things and make them usable because it's fashioning a vessel on Yom Tov. Moving on to another one of the Menhagim, which I said we don't do Megillas Rus, so that will be the Reish of Achris, but the Yud was Yerech, setting up greenery and flowers. Flowers are not muktzah. Flowers that are made for smell, that we set up in our house for beauty, are not muktzah. That's okay, you could touch them, you can move them, that's fine. Leaves that fall off those flowers are muktzah. So you can't move them. I mean, you could do like you always do in sweeping and cleaning, but you can't actually move the leaves. Your flowers are in water. You can't put the flowers in water on Yom Tov. If you have water already, you're allowed to put the flowers into the water, but you're not allowed to put water into the vase on Yom Tov. That's considered a tircha and unnecessary labor, filling up the vase with water. Even the mere filling up the vase with water, sometimes you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov. You're also not allowed to take the water and change the water. For the benefit of the flowers, usually it's a good idea to get rid of some of the water, to pour out some of the water and add new water. You can't change the water. You're allowed to add water on Yom Tov. You're allowed to add water according to halach. If you're adding up to half from the amount of water that was there, that's still considered adding. It's not considered changing. But you're only allowed to add water on Shabbos. You can't add water either. So again, you can't fill up the vase with water. You're allowed to put the flowers into the water. That you're allowed to do. You're not allowed to change the water, but you're allowed to add water. But you're only allowed to add the water or put the flowers into the water if the flowers have opened up, if the rose roses have opened up already, have blossomed already, then you're allowed to put it in. Otherwise, you're not allowed to put it into the water or add water. B'negeya to the minig of Tikkun Leil Shavuos. Tikkun Leil Shavuos is a very important minig. It's a preparation, our preparation for Kabbalah Satira. The Zohar has some very special things to say about people that practice the minig of Tikkun Leil Shavuos. The Arizal gives us special promises about Tikkun Leil Shavuos. The person will live through the year, and so on and so forth. And it's really a tikkun for our neshama. That's what the definition of the word tikkun is. If whatever issues we've gone through, we want to make sure we cleanse ourselves properly for Shavuos nights, for Shavuos, for Kabbalah Satira. Tikkun is the way to do it. But like in everything in Yiddishkeit, we have to make sure it's not yotza schore b'aseder. We can't win some things and based on that lose other things. So for example, a person really wants to be careful to be up the entire Shavuos night, but because of that, he'll miss out the mitzvahs hasei ben HaTorah of saying Shema at the right time. Shema these days is a bit early. I believe in New York it's about, today I think it was 9:09 or something like that. So if a person will miss out the mitzvah of saying Shema at the right time because he was up a whole night, that's ridiculous. If a person is up a whole night and just says and speaks Dvarim B'Teilim, so besides the fact that if somebody is sitting Yoshev Batel Kiyashin, I mean, if somebody sits idly, it's as if he was sleeping. So it's not considered as if you were up, so you didn't accomplish that. It's considered as if you slept, and you were actually suffering by staying up a whole night. So why would you want to do that? But in addition to all of that, Dvarim B'Teilim is not the right hachana preparation of Kabbalah Satira. If a person will be up and speak Dvarim B'Teilim, he should go to bed, because he's accomplishing much more by sleeping than by sitting and talking Dvarim B'Teilim. Someone has asked, one of the questions that was submitted, the person knows that at Tikkun Leil Shavuos, they can do both Tikkun and learn their regular Shiurim. Now, I don't know, a lot of times you ask such a question, you need to know if the question is really accurate. Somebody says, no, what's better, I should be with a Jewish girl or a non-Jewish girl? I mean, what's better? You shouldn't do either of them. They're both forbidden. So, I know this is an extreme example. The question is whether it's really correct to say that if I'm up Tikkun, I won't be able to do Shiurim. Maybe you could do both. But really, if the situation is such that a person can't do both, and that's something which a person should discuss with her mashpi and assess that, certainly Tikkun Leil Shavuos was not there to replace the mitzvah of Hilchos Talmud Torah, of learning Torah. And certainly not to replace regular Shiurim Kvuim, which al pi halacha is almost like a neder, almost like a vow, when a person has regular fixed Shiurim. Obviously, the Shiurim of vow and Rabbein, which are extremely important. So the Tikkun should not replace the Shiurim. The Tikkun Shavuos is to add on top of that, to add in addition to the regular Talmud Torah they're learning every single day. Now we're going to add and be up their entire night as a preparation for Kabbalah Satira. So I guess that answers that question. We mentioned that Tikkun Leil Shavuos should not be at the expense of other mitzvahs, and we mentioned saying Shema at the right time. So although the right time saves my Krishma is a bit after 9 o'clock, but you don't have to wait until then. You could say Krishma right when it becomes morning. Ideally should be said Misha Yaker, which is a time that a person could detect a friend within a distance of 4 amas. That's not something which I would suggest you go out in the street and test that, because in today's day and age with street lights, you can't really work that out properly. You should check your local calendar when that is. I don't remember offhand when that is this year, but in the Bedat's Shavuos guide, we've put the correct times, at least for the Crown Heights area. But you could even already say Krishma from Alois HaShachar. Again, it's best to wait to Misha Yaker, but if you know your chances are, if you're going to wait till then, you might fall asleep, and you're afraid you don't want to wait for the Soivzman Krishma because you might miss that and sleep through it, then just say it from Alois HaShachar. But I will mention that halacha is you now let us learn any Torah from Alois HaShachar without saying Birchas HaTorah. You need to make a bracha on Torah, and certainly on the day of Shavuos, the day when Eibishter gave us the Torah, we should be much more careful with this Isser and this halacha, Birchas HaTorah, which is according to many poskim and mitzvahs hasem ben HaTorah. No, this bracha, unlike any other bracha except for benching is min HaTorah, and one other bracha which is min HaTorah is Birchas HaTorah, which the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch tells us when we say Birchas HaTorah, we need to say with simcha. We need, as if we're mamish, we're so excited and enjoying the fact that we have the schus to be able to learn Torah. So in the Shulchan Aruch, it's not coming from my Chassidus, what I just now said. This is Klei Chamdasish HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is something which Hashem's pleasure is with Torah, and we have the ability that we have that. So Birchas is a mitzvah that we value very, very much. And when it comes in the morning, the minute it becomes Alois HaShachar, we're not going to learn any further Torah until we say Birchas HaTorah. And it's likewise, before we say Shema, which is part of Torah, the 3 parshas of Shema, we must make sure to say Birchas Torah before that. At Chassidim, we value very much the Hirois of the Rebbe. And one of the Hirois that the Rebbe repeated many times over the years, starting, I believe, from Tafshin Mem, is the importance of everybody attending Shul on the day of Matan Torah, during Matan Torah. And the Rebbe pointed out that according to the Medrash, every year Matan Torah repeats itself. I mean, that we know from, in general, that Hayom, illness, Karav, and Ice, and everything that happened once repeats itself every year. But according to the Medrash, it actually happens during Kriyas HaTorah. So when we're reading the Torah on the first day of Shavuos about Matan Torah, that is when Matan Torah is happening. So the Rebbe urged, recommended, suggested that we should have everybody in Shul, and in this case, we should even have little children, Ketanim, even young children, come to Shul, at least for Aseres HaDibros. So a couple of things that are important, and particularly taking into account the current situation where we find ourselves, where there are still restrictions. Different states are different, and different doctors have different opinions, and there are legalities involved, and I'm certainly not a doctor. Well, that might be my next profession, I'm considering it, based on all the medical questions I've been receiving over the last 2 months. But right now, I'm not a doctor yet. So I will mention the halachic aspects that are relevant. The Bezdin put out today a letter, also outline the details. I'm just going to go with them a bit more at length. First of all, it is clear that the Harav, the Rebbe Tira Aseres HaDibros, is not something that should be done in a way that endangers people's lives. So much so that the Rebbe made sure to emphasize, both in writing to people that promoted the mitzvah of Aseres HaDibros, the Rebbe asked, why did he promote this mitzvah? He did not write that this is only if health allows, im habrias marsha. And also, Mugadi Gesichts, when the Rebbe spoke about it, the Rebbe spoke clearly that only if this is in a way that's healthy. The pashtas the Rebbe was talking about, from the context of the Sikhs, we're talking about bringing little children, very young, even newborn babies, is not always healthy based on medical guidelines that they should come. So the same way we're keeping the Rebbe's Hara of coming to Aseres HaDibros, we need to keep also the Hara of the Rebbe, which is equally Hara of the Rebbe, to do it in a way that's healthy and safe, medically safe and sound. Again, what that means, talk to your local doctors and find out what the guidelines in your place is. That's number one. And people that cannot do it in a way that's medically safe should not come to Aseres HaDibros, the same way they don't come to Kriyas HaTorah throughout the year. I'll mention something interesting, that we don't normally promote people not coming to Shul. We're not in that business lately. The rabbis have changed their profession a bit and are starting to promote keeping less and less mitzvahs, but it's all because of the overriding concern of Pikuach Nefesh. So I will mention something interesting, that the Arizal would have a minyan in his house, and the Lashon in Chaim Vital writes about the Arizal, he wasn't worried about Kriyas HaTorah. He did not have a Sefer Torah in his house, so he had a minyan over a period of time in his house, and there was no Kriyas HaTorah. Now, I'm not sure what the reason was, whether it was because he didn't want to move his Sefer Torah unnecessarily, which we'll talk about that. The Mekabalim, much more than the Pesachim, are very concerned about moving the Sefer Torah, or it just wasn't possible to get a Sefer Torah. I don't know. But the Lashon that the Chaim Vital testifies, he writes about the Menhagim of his Rebbe, the Arizal, he was not concerned about Kriyas HaTorah. And there are many people that sometimes miss out Kriyas HaTorah. Kriyas HaTorah Shavuos is the same way. And if a person can't, they can't, and that's part of, they serve Hashem that way too. When hearing Aseres HaDibros, we do it in a way we want to accommodate men, women, and children, but that has to be done in a kosher, halachically acceptable way. And obviously, you cannot lay the Torah when there's men and women together. A mechitza needs to be placed. Now, the definition of a mechitza means something which is not see-through, to separate between the men and the women. And this mechitza could be prepared if it's an outdoor minyan. Well, we'll talk about that momentarily. It could be prepared. The mechitza is allowed to be set up on Yom Tov. In other words, put up the mechitza. It's not considered oil. There's certain kind of mechitzas that cannot be put up on Yom Tov, but a mechitza separate between men and women is not considered what we call a mechitza hamateres. It's a mechitza done just for tznius, and therefore that can be put up in Yom Tov. It's not a shaila of oil. Obviously, you can't start taking nails and screws and banging and taking hammers and say, well, the Rav said that you're allowed to put up a mechitza in Yom Tov. I'm talking specifically just of putting up the mechitza, not any other malachas. So any other thing that's involved to try to keep the mechitza hanging, you need to prepare a rope and tie it or whatever it is. That you'll do, of course, before Yom Tov. You also can't put a mechitza on over a tree, because if there will be outdoor minyanim, some people might want to have the mechitza on a tree. You could do mechitza on a tree if you do it before Yom Tov, but on Yom Tov you can't just put up the mechitza over a tree because you can't use a tree on Shabbos and Yom Tov. When we read the Aseres HaDibros, the Rebbe's lashon was to make sure that people come to shul at least for Aseres HaDibros. Implying they really would prefer if they come for the rest of Kriya too. One time the Rebbe said Aseres HaDibros and a few psukim before. Certainly you can't arrange a Kriyas HaTorah of only Aseres HaDibros. That's a serious halachic issue just to learn Aseres HaDibros. There needs to be the entire Kriyas HaTorah read, which means all 5 aliyahs with brachas before and after, and that was the Rebbe's expression, bracha lefanel la'achreya. And of course, Maftar needs to be recited too. That's part of the system of Kriyas HaTorah. In addition to the fact that we need to read all the Kriyas HaTorah, going back to the theme of outdoor minyanim. So over the last while, we've discovered a lot of interesting things: block minyanim, porch minyanim, outdoor minyanim, a lot of creative ways how to run a minyan in a way that's deemed medically safe. And again, I'm not discussing right now the medical aspects, because that is different from one location to another. But there is such a concept of doing outdoor minyanim. However, it's a very serious issue to take a Sefer Torah into the street. The Zohar, which is said as part of the Minor Lashon when people go to the oil, the Zohar warns very seriously about the prohibition and with the outcome of moving a Sefer Torah unnecessarily, even from one shul to another, the kol shkei lebei rechav, and certainly to the street. I'm saying this a bit in jest, but it's true. The Rebbe quoted this Zohar, the Rebbe said this Zohar twice a week, and sometimes more than twice a week, because twice a week the Rebbe would go to the Oil, would read the Minor Lashon, the Rebbe repeated the Zohar every single time he said over the Zohar, the same Zohar that says this. But this is not only a Zohar issue, it's halachically a very, very serious issue. It's considered a bizoyin to the Sefer Torah. It's not considered respectful to the Sefer Torah. So if you're having it on the porch, or in a chutzner, in a courtyard, that's fine. But to schlep the Sefer Torah into the street, that is not acceptable. We cannot schlep the Sefer Torah in the street. That's not something that the Rebbe intended, that we should arrange a Kriyas HaTorah for Aseres HaDibros in a way that violates the covenant of Sefer Torah. I'll add another interesting point, and that is that when the Rebbe spoke about coming to Aseres HaDibros, he spoke about the advantage of hearing Aseres HaDibros in the shul, in a Makom Kadesh. So the Rebbe didn't want that people should make Aseres HaDibros out of shul. He wanted it to be done in shul. Now, not always is that practical. We have a concept in halacha, ein done an efsher mishi efsher. Nowadays, some shuls are not allowed to even be opened. In New York, the guidelines are you can only have 10 people in a shul. There are also medical concerns, so I'm not suggesting that everybody should run to shul. But certainly we shouldn't add to that and do a Kriyas HaTorah outdoors, not only in a porch or in a yard, but let the Sefer Torah out into the street in a way which is a bizoyin to the Sefer Torah. That's something which is not acceptable. That's not what the Rebbe intended. And one more final thing. When we want more people to hear Kriyas HaTorah, we can make a number of minyanim for Kriyas HaTorah. Although Kriyas HaTorah typically is part of davening, and that's how we arrange Kriyas HaTorah. We don't just do Kriyas HaTorah independent of davening. So much so, there are poskim that say that there are those that want to say that if somebody heard already Kriyas HaTorah before, now when they're davening, if they already heard, they need to do Kriyas HaTorah again because it's part of davening. But that is not the halacha. And the Rebbe commented on someone who mentioned this opinion. The Rebbe wrote that he never heard of such a thing that people should do that everybody heard Kriyas HaTorah before. But since the davening now, it becomes part of davening. So we don't practice that opinion. But again, like I said, normally there's a Seder Tefillah and Kriyas HaTorah is part of davening. But nonetheless, we sometimes have a Kriyas HaTorah not part of davening. For example, a person missed Kriyas HaTorah. The Chassam Sofer writes about his Rebbe, Talmid of Chassam Sofer, the Chassam Sofer, they were traveling, they didn't have a Sefer Torah, and they had to make up Kriyas HaTorah. So they did a Kriyas HaTorah even in the afternoon. There are places that question doing an afternoon Kriyas HaTorah, and l'chatchila, certainly Kriyas HaTorah is supposed to be in the morning, but you could have a Kriyas HaTorah independent of davening. The Rebbe himself did that too. After Yechidah, sometimes a special minyan was arranged just for Kriyas HaTorah. In the context of Shavuos specifically, in order to accommodate as much people as possible, when the Rebbe spoke about this mitzvah, he said it's quite easy to accomplish that everybody should come to shul. Even though sometimes you can't have everybody leaving the home, some people need to stay home for security reasons. to watch some of the children that can't go to shul. So the Rebbe said you can have multiple minyanim. That was what the Rebbe said. And for Kriyas HaTorah, and some people go to the first minute, and some people go to the second minute, and that's something that's done in a lot of Chabad houses, a lot of shuls, and this is not something to be. This is something which is halachically acceptable. It's perfectly fine. You do need, however, make sure that that minyan is halachically acceptable from a different point of view. That if everybody heard Kriyas HaTorah before, you can't do again. Everybody in the minyan, the men, heard Kriyas HaTorah. You can't just do again Kriyas HaTorah and make all the brachas again if they were already yotzah. And the way it is done, there's a discussion with Poskim how many people it needs to be, but it is accepted that if there's 6 people, and that is the minig. We're not going to discuss this right now, why? But if there's 6 people that have not heard Kriyas HaTorah yet, you can have them make a minyan just for them with 4 other men joining. So for example, if you have a minyan of 12 people, so they comes to Kriyas HaTorah, 6 won't listen to Kriyas HaTorah, and we'll save them for later, and then we'll have 4 people that were already there before joining to make sure we have another minyan. Moving on to the minhag of milchiks. We spoke a bit before about how to make your milchiks, and now we'll talk about the actual suda of milchiks. So, sorry, one second. Talking about the minhag of eating milchiks, we just like we mentioned before about tikkun and Shovuos, that a minhag, and tikkun and Shovuos is very important, but it cannot replace things that are important. Likewise, milchiks is a minhag, but there's a mitzvah al pi Shulchan Aruch, a mitzvah, the Rebbe referred to it as a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, to eat fleishiks and yontiv as part of our simchas yontiv. So the minhag of eating milchiks is not there to replace the mitzvah of eating fleishiks. Every Shabbos and every yontiv we eat fleishiks, and Shavuos is no different. Shavuos we added something else in addition to that in minhag to eat milchiks, but not to take away the minhag of fleishiks. Furthermore, the Alter Rebbe brings the minhag of eating milchiks, and he says there are many reasons for this minhag. If we look at the Ramah, one of the earliest sources, there's even earlier than the Ramah, but one of the earliest sources in halacha for this minhag, the Ramah brings the reason why we eat milchiks is because we want to commemorate the Shtei Halechem. There were 2 loaves of bread that were brought in the Beis Hamikdash together with a carbon on Shavuos. And to commemorate the 2 loaves of bread, we have both milchiks and fleishiks. Because when you're eating a meal, you cannot use the same bread for the milchik meal and for the fleishik meal. So you'll naturally have to use 2 breads. And therefore, we'll have a milchik meal and a fleishik meal that will be like 2 loaves of bread. So clearly, the minhag was to have 2 meals. Strangely, I'm not sure why, the minhag was to have first a fleishik meal and then a milchik meal, which could be a bit complicated, probably because the fleishik meal is more important according to halacha. But that was the minhag in some places, in many places. But the minhag in Chabad, and by the Rabbeim, the minhag is, and that's how the Rebbe writes in Hayom Yom for children, the Rebbe brings down this minhag. There's a calendar the Rebbe wrote called Young Scholars Pocket Calendar. I believe the Rebbe says that the minhag that we first eat milchiks, we take a break, then we eat fleishiks. And we also are accommodating the 2 loaves of bread, even though we don't wash for the milchik meal, because mezainis is also considered bread according to halacha. We have cake. Cake is a form of bread. If you eat a lot of mezainis, then you actually have to wash on it because it's a kviyas suda. So that's our way of doing it. People might have different minhagim. I don't want to chas v'shalom say anything about people who have another custom, but the correct way of doing it, the way which is consistent with halacha, both with the halacha of the mitzvah of simchas yontiv, which is with meat, both with the reason for the minhag, which is to commemorate 2 loaves of bread, 2 meals, and both with the actual minhag Chabad is to have Shavuos day, on the first day, a milchik meal, and then later a fleishik meal with a break in between. Some people wanted to make sure that this became a bit problematic, and they didn't want to take away from simchas yontiv, and they started a minhag, particularly in German communities, to have a milchik meal by night, which is less of an issue of taking away from simchas yontiv. But even that is not ideal, because really the mitzvah of simchas yontiv should be practiced by night and by day. Normally we have Yom Tov night a fleishik meal, and Yom Tov day a fleishik meal. So again, I don't want to say anything about other people's minhagim, but the correct, pure absolutely correct, 100% correct halachic way, which is mini chaman, is to have first a bit of milchiks, take a short break, and then fleishiks. The break is as far and our custom is an hour break. According to halacha, you wouldn't even have to take any break to milk and fleishiks. Just have to wash your hands and make sure they're clean. But our minig is to wait an hour based on the zohar. The hour is not from when you finish the bracha achronis, when you last time you touched milchig food. So as soon as you finish milchig food, even if you didn't make a bracha achroni yet, you wait an hour, and the hour doesn't have to be from when you start the next. You don't have to start the next meal after an hour. You can start the next meal and serve everything until you get to the meat part of the meal, to the chicken, to the soup, whatever it is that you're serving that's fleishig. By that time, an hour should pass. So it could really work in a very practical way. And we also have to make sure that we don't make it all a part of one meal. We have to make a bracha achroni between both meals. I mentioned before, just for emphasis, I'll reiterate it, that when eating mezainis in your first meal, don't overdo it. First of all, we want to have place for the fleishig meal. Second of all, if you eat too much and you become full, then it becomes a shaila of a brich hamoitze, brich samazna, becomes a question of a kvi suda. There's a shaila about what you do, what bracha achrona you make if you have cheesecake or other such kind of milchig meals where there's a tiny bit of flour and you're eating a full kazayis. Do you make a ala michya, or you need to have a kazayis only of the flour? So according to halacha, if the percentage of the flour is 1/6 of the mixture, then you can make an ala michya directly on that cheesecake. But if there's less flour, then you're running into a problem because it's a suffix if you should make ala michya because you do have some flour in it. After all, you're making a mezainis because the flour is the main thing. Suffix, maybe you should make bar nefashos, and therefore what you're supposed to do is take another kazayis, which is definitely ala michya, and another kazayis, which is definitely bar nefashos, and to avoid this issue. Well, but you don't have to make your cheesecake that way. You can make a cheesecake that has so much more flour and only a thin amount of cheese, like they do in all the schnitzels and all the stores, but they want to save money on meat. So what they do is they put a lot of flour and a very thin sliver of chicken. So the same way in the milk and the cheesecake, we can do a lot of flour, a little bit of cheese, and then in such a case, if you eat a kazayis, you can right away make a bracha achrona on it. Hard cheese, the minig is will wait 6 hours. It's a whole debate. What's the definition of hard cheese? A lot of people have the custom that it makes sense that any hard cheese, they just wait 6 hours and finish. So that really you have to know what your minig is about that. And you don't have to necessarily serve hard cheese in the meal, in the milchig meal. But it's important to make sure that you, if you do, you'll have to wait 6 hours. So really hard cheese that aged for 6 months, really 6 hours people should wait 6 hours. Unless the cheese is plain hard cheese, regular yellow cheese, like I said, it's a machlokes, but if it's also melted and it's not really cheese that is aged, there's definitely room to be lenient just to wait the regular hour. Sharp foods that are cut with a milchig knife are considered milchig. Sharp foods that are cut with a fleishig knife are considered fleishig. This is a very important and extreme halach which has very extreme ramifications. Normally, it's hard to treif up your kitchen, and really, unless you really want to make sure you treifed it up, because there's always another loophole, another reason why it didn't get treifed up. For example, there's a rule that something once 24 hours have passed, and there's no actual substance of the food there, a keli, once 24 hours have passed on the keli, that keli, although you're not allowed to use it, can't treif anything up anymore. Sharp foods, when they combine with a knife, is an allergic, perhaps we can say a viral reaction in today's day and age. The chemistry of having the sharp food with the knife together, that creates a pandemic in a firm kitchen, and that makes a serious problem, because if it's a knife, the pressure of the knife plus the sharp food together, that means even if the knife is 100% clean, normally heat transfers taste. There's no heat over here. The knife has also now been used for 4 years for fleishiks, but I once used this knife for fleishiks, and now I cut an onion. This onion is considered fleishik. So the healthy thing to avoid such kind of issues is to have a special part of a knife in your house. You only use a part of a knife and a part of a cutting board for sharp vegetables, for onion, for garlic, for radishes. And if you really want, you should use it for all your vegetables, because you'll keep them, have to take a different kind, which just becomes a nightmare. Now, important to emphasize, this sharp food that was cut with a milchig knife is milchig, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you became milchig from it. You have to treat that item like milchig, that onion like milchig. And what that means in practice is, if you ate meat and now you want to eat a salad which was cut with a milchig knife, you really shouldn't be eating that onion because that onion is milchig. But if you ate a salad and after that you want to eat meat, that's not a problem. Not only that, if you ate actual milk and after the milk you want to eat food that was cut with a sharp knife, even though you actually ate real milk, but in this case, because waiting between milk and meat is anyhow not halach, it's only between meat and milk, it's just a minig, you don't have to wait after you had your dairy meal not to eat onions that were cut with a fleshig knife. You don't have to go that far, only if you actually going to eat fleshigs after the milk meal. I hope I didn't confuse you over here. For those who got confused a bit, it's a good idea you'll check the Badav's guide, where all this is made very, very clear. I'll move into a couple of questions that were sent in. We'll try to do whatever we can. We have a limited amount of time here. The question was about showers on Yom Tov. So I'll start with the easiest thing with cold showers. Cold showers is a minig. The minig is brought down Shulchan Aruch that a person should not wash even with cold water on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And there are many reasons for that minig. This minig is a serious minig. The Aruch HaShulchan writes about this minig that somebody who breaches a fence, the lashon of a pasuk, should be bit by a snake. What that means is that you shouldn't just play around with a minig, which was made as a fence to protect us from violating various different isudim. But that minig has its limitations. That minig doesn't apply to all cases. In a case where a person's in a lot of pain, he's mitzayir, it's very difficult to go without a shower. Yes, they can let it go and do a cold shower on Yom Tov in such a case, because the minig was not made for a person that's under a lot of tsar. Now, people today's day and age are just slightly uncomfortable. They call that mitzayir. It becomes a bit of a challenge how to define what's called mitzayir. But if a person is itching and it's becoming difficult for him, then yes, they can take a cold shower. But that doesn't become a heter for doing a cold shower in the mikveh. That's a personalized heter, which can be done in the house. Hot water is a much more serious issue. Hot water, according to halacha, Machlokes Rambam and the Ran and Tosfos, what's the reason why there's a problem with taking a hot shower in Yom Tov, whether it's Issa D'Rabbanan or maybe even Issa D'Oraisa? I'll mention just the bottom line halacha because we're running out of time and it's a bit late. According to Tosfos, which is the halacha, the problem is heating up the water because it's not considered oichel nefesh. It's not oichel nefesh to take a shower. It's not a necessity to take a shower every day, even though today's age some people think it is. The washing your face, hands, and feet, that's considered a necessity. And if you're not washing your entire body, you're not washing the majority, you're just washing a couple of parts of the body, like face, hands, and feet, or you're picking only stomach and face. It doesn't have to be after that. That's something which you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. You're allowed to even heat up the water on Yom Tov. That's considered mamish like oichel nefesh. But the whole body you're not allowed to do, even if you heated up the water from before Yom Tov. Even a child which you normally wash every single day, you're still not allowed to do it because it's be a question of a Issa D'Oraisa. So the simple solution is, you don't have to wash the entire body, just wash face, hands, and feet. Most people would manage with that very, very well. If a person has to mamish wash their entire body, so they can heat up water from before Yom Tov, and they heat up water from before Yom Tov, then they're allowed to wash aver, bit by bit. So they wash the hand, wash the foot, wash the face, not just take one shower on the entire body. And even then, the lashon has to be chutz l'merchet, has to be out of the bathhouse, which is a problem because you might create a serious flood. You're not supposed to stand in the bathhouse, which in this case would be the bathtub, with taking the shower on bit aver, each section of the body at a time. You should stand outside and take what we call a little, what do you call that thing? A shower hand, and where you can actually get onto different parts of the body separately, move it around, but don't stand in the actual merchits. And again, but that would only work with water that was preheated before Yom Tov, which you don't have that in your shower. So if you want to go start taking water from the urn and mix together, it becomes a bit complicated. Like I said, the easiest thing is just wash Panav Yodav V'Raglav and you'll be safe. You don't have to wash the entire body. Most people will manage well with just washing the key sweaty sections. You're still not want to squeeze. There's Isra of Schita, which is particularly relevant to the hair, and therefore when you shouldn't pressing on the hair, don't use shampoo on the hair. That's a problem. Water is fine. You can't use hard soap on Yom Tov in general. You can use liquid soap. Some people are machmer. They try to liquefy the soap even more than regular liquid soap. And nowadays, and during the virus, a lot of people have been using Perel throughout this tkufa. And the poskim have mentioned that it's okay to use it on Shabbos. If you want to be machmer, you can liquefy and add a bit more liquid to it. But hard soap is a problem. I also should mention that it really depends on your boiler. Some boilers are a problem. You can't turn them on the Yom Tov, even for washing your dishes, because it ignites a brand new fire. You're not allowed to start a new fire. If you have one of these tankless boilers, you need to find out if your boiler is a permissible boiler to use in Yom Tov. We were talking till now with a boiler that's acceptable to use in Yom Tov. Another question that came in was about lowering the fire while cooking. This is a general Yom Tov question. So, in a gas flame, you let it add, once you have the fire lit before Yom Tov, you let it add to the fire, but you're not allowed to make the fire less. What that means is, you let it turn on the gas flame higher, but you can't go and make it lower. If your food will burn, then really you should, according to many poskim, it's not clear what Alter Rebbe says about this. I'll just mention what the general consensus in poskim is, that really it's better to go and put it onto a different fire, or get another fire started, in a way that you're allowed to do it on Yom Tov, because you can't create a new flame, better than lowering the fire. If you have no choice, you have no other fire, and the food will burn, then you're allowed to lower the fire. With electric flames, that's a problem, because with electric, every time you turn the knob, you're creating an electrical current. And a lot of our gas flames have that problem too. The actual turning it on already, there's an electrical current there. You need to know exactly what's happening. You can disable that or neutralize that, but you need to make sure you're not igniting any new fires or creating new electrical currents. Just the fire itself, independent of electricity. So we allow to increase the fire, and we only decrease it if we have no choice. The question was about adding water to electric urn on Yom Tov if a light will go on. May I ask a guy? You're certainly allowed to ask a guy to add water. And not only allowed to ask a guy, many poskim say you're allowed to add water yourself. It's not considered directly lighting a fire. Even though a light will go on, that's an indirect, it's gram havara. Some poskim say you're allowed to do it yourself. But guy, there's zero problem on so many levels. You're allowed to ask a guy to turn on a light for you on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos, if you really need it. In this case, it's more than just asking to turn on a light. I'm really asking him to add water. Because he's adding water, a light will go on. We call this a psik, which you allowed to ask a guy to do something which is a psik. There's really no problem asking a guy. Like I said, many persons will say you're allowed to even do it yourself. And if the urn doesn't have a light at all, for sure you're allowed to add water to the urn to heat up more water. There's no question whatsoever. One more question here was, is there a problem with cooking a fruit dessert on Yom Tov? There's no problem with that. Fruit desserts are anything which is fresher and tastier when you make it on Yom Tov than if you make it the day before. You're allowed to do it on Yom Tov. To the best of my knowledge, fruit desserts that are made the day before will not taste as fresh if it was made on Yom Tov. So if you're allowed to prepare it on Yom Tov. Any other questions? How do I do this? I'm not very good at this. Where do I go to here? If there are any more questions. Just some questions sent in. I'm just trying to see if I can find it.
Braun, should I message you the questions, or
you want to message me the questions? How are you going to send them? By email?
I emailed you a few questions, but people are private messaging me.
Okay, I'll look at the email. Okay.
Okay.
Why don't we have, one question was, why don't we have greenery in shul on Shavuos? It doesn't say this very clearly. We know from the Gra, and there's one Chabad posting that wrote this. I don't know if that's the official reason why we don't have greenery, but the Gra stopped greenery in shuls because it was chukas hagoyim. That was something that the goyim have done in their places. And like I said, there was one Chabad posting that wrote the same thing too. The Munkach writes the same thing. Also, you shouldn't have greenery. It could very well be that's our reason to be machmer about the issue of chukas hagoyim and not have greenery. Another question was, I don't plan on cooking, I only plan on warming up soup. Do I need to make an Erev Tashilin? You need to make an Erev Tashilin if you're doing any type of preparation from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Even if you're only going to light candles, most people will light candles, that's also a form of cooking, and you will need to make an Erev Tashilin. However, if you're staying in someone else's house, and you're Samach al Shulchanai, and you're like a member of that person's family, then that person's Erev Tashilin could be valid for you. But excluding that fact that I just now mentioned, the fact that you're doing even the malacha of just lighting candles is itself a reason why you would have to make an Erev Tashilin. Now, the best thing is if you're staying in someone else's house, because it's not so clear how you become a member of his family. Do you need to be staying in his house from Erev Yom Tov when the Erev Tashilin is made? Do you need to be in his house staying there over Shabbos when you're going to use the Erev Tashilin? Do you need to be there on Yom Tov when the cooking is done? And if you're not going to be there for all 3 days, it's not that very, very clear. The best thing is to avoid the entire Shiloh. Just go to the person who's making the Erev Tashilin and have him actually make, not just rely on his Erev Tashilin, have him actually do the Erev Tashilin on your behalf by giving to someone else and picking it up on your behalf, and then you avoid any Shiloh, so you can just rely on his Erev Tashilin. Another question here. Is a parking lot considered a street in regards to laning? The truth is, this halachas are not very, very clear. It really depends if it looks like a design to the Sefer Torah. So if it's a chatzar of a shul, some places don't even allow moving it in the shul from one room to another, or to a chatzar of the shul. If it's considered an extension of the house, that's fine. People are laning on porches, people are laning in their driveways, if it's mechubadik for the Sefer Torah. I don't know how this parking lot looks like, and what's its general look. But if it's something which is schlepping the Sefer Torah into the street, no, that's not something that we should be doing. Any other questions before we call it a night?
Braun, could I open the chat so people could, there's a number of questions asked, but it's difficult for me to afford them to you. Could I open the chat so you...
Open the chat, I'll do this very quick. I do need to run, so I'll look if there's another 1 or 2 questions.
Okay, so someone asked if they could use liquid scented hand cream on Shabbos and Yom Tov.
If they could use, I don't hear you, speak up.
Liquid scented hand cream on Shabbos and Yom Tov.
Okay, so let's take 2 things at a time. There's scented. You asked about scented, and there's hand cream, right? They're 2 different topics.
Right. They are,
okay.
Yeah.
So regard to using scented liquid, or scented perfume, or scented shampoo, other things like that on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to be moila derech. You're not allowed to create a new smell on Shabbos or Yom Tov. However, if your kavana is not in order to create a smell, your kavana is in order to remove a bad smell, then you're allowed to do that on Shabbos or Yom Tov. That's called in halach of psik reisha. We actually mentioned that term in regard to the goy filling up the water before in the urn, and the light will go on. That's called psik reisha. That's not what your intention is. Normally, psik reisha is forbidden on Shabbos or Yom Tov, where something is not your intention, but it will definitely happen. But when Amidul Anachri asking the guy to do something for you, for example, opening the fridge and you forgot to turn off the light. So I asked, what's the problem? The guy is being my shliach. Well, I only asked him to open the fridge. I never asked him to turn on the light. And turning on the light is just an outcome. That's one halach where psik reisha is permissible. And another case is what we call psik reisha b'reach. The halach of moilud reich, of creating a new smell, is not a problem when it's an indirect result. That's not what I'm intending. The Alter Rebbe brings a meaning that when they would wash the hands for the kohen and by duchening, they would put in some smelly stuff into the water, and that would create a smell. And Alter Rebbe says that's a serious problem because moilud reich is also a problem. The adam, the psat adam, creating a good smell for a person, but only if that's your intention. If you're using a scented thing, if that's the only one you have in the house, then that's not really a problem. But if you're using it because you actually, or if you're using it because you want to remove a bad smell, that's also not a problem. But if you're using it because you want the smell, then there's a problem. With regards to hand cream, that is a serious issue, hand cream. It really depends on the viscosity of the hand cream. It's a very hard thing to measure. The problem is smearing is a problem of mareach or mamachik. And if it's extremely liquidy, then it's not a problem. But most hand creams don't really fall into that category. And therefore, Pesachim are very machmer about hand creams. What you could do is, you could, if there's a place where there's some cut or wound, we need to put some type of cream, then you could put the hand cream on a spot without smearing it, just dab it, just put it down. That's okay. And without yivla, maybe it will absorb. I'm looking here. I just don't know how to read this in a way that I can actually see what's going on over here. Where are we here? There's a lot of questions here. If a baby is extremely dirty, we're allowed to give them a bath. I think we covered that, and I said you're allowed to wash. Though Panav Yondav and Ragav is certainly no problem. If the baby is dirty, that area for sure can be washed, as long as they're not washing the entire body. If one is not in Sar, can you take a shower mitzad going to mikvah on Shabbos and Yom Tov? So yes, you are allowed. If you showers instead of mikvah, you could take a cold shower, by the way, for that matter. I wouldn't go so far and say you're allowed to go and do hot shower on Yom Tov. On Shabbos, certainly you're not allowed to. But a cold shower you could take mitzad mikvah, and that's not including the minig that we don't wash with cold water. The minig didn't go on mikvah. The same way we even go into a hot mikvah on Shabbos, even though there's a gezeiras chachamim not to go into a bathhouse, because a mikvah is not included in gezeiras merchatzois. So yes, you're allowed to use a cold shower for instead of mikvah for those who don't have a mikvah these days. A solution that works actually is prepare some hot water in a pail. For those who are doing the Tisha Kavim with a pail, prepare hot water in a pail before Shabbos, cover it with a plastic, and it stays fairly warm. It won't be hot, it will stay fairly warm until the morning. Where was this? Can you leave hot water over the... Okay, that's not a question related to Yom Tov and Shavuos. I'm only going to focus on the current questions. Diaper rash cream for a baby, yes. The answer for that is you could put on the cream, but just don't smear it. Is there a way to have a guy turn off fires and relight them if you're afraid of sleeping with fires on? This is a bit of a tricky question because a guy on Yom, not on Shabbos, on Shabbos a guy is not allowed to light a fire. On Yom Tov a guy is allowed to light a fire, and certainly is allowed to extinguish a fire. Extinguishing is much less of a problem, even on Shabbos and certainly on Yom Tov. The problem, of course, is that the Alter Rebbe writes in the Kunter Sachni, you're not allowed to plan. Even when we're matter for a guy to do what we call a shvuz, the shvuz, b'makam tzayda gadol, b'makam mitzvah, you can't plan that. You can't plan that I'm going to set up my Shabbos system with the guy unless you really have no choice. This person seems like they have no choice because there's a concern the fire is on as a safety issue. Then in such a case, you have no choice. You can have a guy. Or unless you can set yourself up a timer or something there shouldn't be a problem of a safety issue. You're ripping the silver foil with your hands. No, what we spoke before that you can't rip silver foil, that's nothing to do with how you do it with your hands or something else. It's the very fact that you're fashioning a vessel, you're making a usable silver foil, same as ripping toilet paper. It's not an issue of kerdev ripping and not an issue of nechatach cutting to size. It's masak and mother that you're setting up a silver foil that is not usable. So it won't help with your hands. You'll have to have it pre-cut before Yom Tov. I really don't think I could do all these questions here. Can we refill the chaynik if the light moves from boil to keep warm? So go back to what I said before. I said, according to many poskim, you're allowed to, even if the light goes on or if the light moves, you can get it. Go for sure you can get it, but according to many poskim, even you could do it. And if somebody does that, I wouldn't worry about it. Can we look at the Torah without holding it for the Birchas HaTorah? That was obviously a question related to the current COVID-19 situation. You don't actually have to hold the Torah. You should hold the Torah, but you certainly have to stand by the Torah. There's a misconception out there. There's so many minyanim of these porch minyanim. People will think they can make a bracha from 10 porches away and it's not be by the Sefer Torah. And some people are basing themselves how they did this in 770 on Simchas Torah. There's so many reasons why there's a distinction and it's not the same. Or some people are basing it on the fact that a blind person could get an aliyah, machlokes mechaber and ramah, and it's just like a blind person can get an aliyah, even though he doesn't see the Torah, so we could get an aliyah when 10 porches away, but that's not really correct. I'm not going to go into the whole arichas right now. You must go over to the Torah, at least close enough that you can see the Torah. Now, a blind person can't see, so he's there, and he can't see, what can we do? But you can't stand from far away. You don't have to hold the Torah if there's a safety concern. Is it... Can a family stand together for laning if others can't see them? So we spoke about having a mechitza, but now people are in a porch minyan, so they want to have the men and the women and the family stand together. If other people can't see them, it's not really a problem, but there's a different problem, and it's not a very well-known halacha. The Medrash, the Tana de Belio tells us that one besides for the issue of mechitza during davening, one should not stand within 4 amas of a woman when they're davening. And it actually says also you shouldn't be davening in the street. So at home sometimes that's not a possible thing, but you should really not daven in a way where men and women are all together, even though they're not seen by anybody else, and there's no real need for mechitza. If women are across the street, do you need a mechitza? If they're not seen by the men, I don't see any problem why they would need a mechitza. If they're seen by the men, then we have a problem. We have to set up the minyan in a different way. I will say, it doesn't mean that if a woman passes by, you have to stop Kriyas HaTorah. This issue is setting up things in a certain way. Reb Moshe even goes so far and sometimes allows, in a temporary fashion, if a woman goes in the base of Oval, in a Sheva Brachas, to have her run a minyan that way. But setting up a chatula, men and women should come, that's a problem that we need to have a mechitza. If women are coming by, passing by, you set up the mechitza and they walk by, that doesn't mean you shouldn't continue your Kriyas HaTorah. Okay, I think we'll finish with that. And I'll just wrap off with one more thing that the Rebbe spoke, interestingly, unusually. The Rebbe usually didn't quote other Svarim, not Chabad Svarim. The Rebbe quoted a sefer called Maimer Martcha, from Rav Martcha of Nadvarna. And in the sefer Maimer Martcha, he says that the words, the Gemara says, Hakam Leidim Ba'atzeres, the Bidin Name Lachem, everybody agrees on a Shavuos, we also need to take care of our body. When it comes to every other yom, there's a shayla if it's supposed to be Lashem or Lachem. And the halach is we do Chetzi Lashem, Chetzi Lachem, partially for Hashem, partially for ourselves. And there's a famous word that a Chassid once said, that when he finished davening, he said, now I finished the Chetzi Lachem, now I took care of my part. Now I'll do Chetzi Lashem and I'll go and eat. The Pashut Pshat, davening is Lashem and eating is Lachem. But this Chassid was saying, my davening, that's for me. That'll help my Nefesh Bahamas. My eating, that's Lashem. But the Gemara says, although every yontiv is half and half, Shavuos all agree we have to take care of the Lachem. So the Rebbe said, I remember the way the Rebbe said this after we came in from Talucha. It was a surprise Sikha. It wasn't an unexpected Sikha. The Rebbe said, State in Polish Sfarim, as Nami Lachem is Bigamatri case, that the words Nami Lachem is the Gematria of the word Kates, which means the coming of Mashiach. So the Rebbe spoke how the Nami Lachem, that we really, to be inan means we need, but the be inan Kuros means we daven, we ask for Hashem, we should have the Shvu Lachem, which means we should have the Kates Agola. We've had a pandemic which messed up our lives big time, has taken away the best souls that we had, has done things which are, I mean, even one of them is an Olam Molam Yisrael. And now is a time there's a tremendous urus amongst Anash, and it actually went even further to the rest of the world about Shalom and Achdus and Abbas Yisrael, Achdus Yisrael, which is the ultimate Keli for Kabbalah HaTorah. And we're looking forward for that. If we're getting together, we get a tremendous bracha from Hashem. We're looking forward to have a time where it'll be Kol Godly Shuva Heinu, when the whole Klal Yisrael will be one singular Kol. The Nagachana tells us, that I've quoted so many times, that a tzibur is not 10 people. A tzibur is one mitzias comprised of 10. It becomes a brand new entity. We want to have a Kol Godla, a true Lachem, a true Gula. We want to hear not Kriyas HaTorah from the Balkar on my porch, but a Kriyas HaTorah from the Melech HaMashiach and the Sefer Torah Shel Mashiach, in the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, the Torah, the true Matan Torah, the Torah Chadashim, Yipiv Shel Mashiach Tzidkenu, Teikif Umiyad Mamish Mashiach now.
Amen. Yashikayach, Harav Braun. Yashikayach for joining, everyone. If you'd like a recording of this event, please email me at ahelyyyd@gmail.com. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. Hopefully, there will be other and more opportunities. Sei gesund. Again, if you want the recording, I posted my email. I'll post it one more time. Here it is. It was posted okay. I'm going to